Some of you have been asking, when am I going to cover Rashad Richey's recent video where he interviewed his old graduate advisor, Chike Aqua? Originally, I was going to cover the entire 19 minutes of the video in one sitting. But Rashad and Chike fall all over themselves so often that my video would have been 2 hours long. So I decided to chop it up into more manageable pieces. So what's this first video about? Well, I've been wanting to come up with a new nickname for Rashad that captured his true intellect. While Rashad the Fraud spoke to his honesty, I didn't have anything to speak to his idiocy. I looked up synonyms for dumbass and couldn't find anything that had the right sound to it. So I was watching an old episode of Car 54 Where Are You? It's a fairly funny sitcom from the early 1960s. I was watching this one episode when Rashad's new nickname came to me in a vision. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With cold, blunt analysis cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's time for the Johnny Walker Dread Show.
In Car 54 Where Are You? Joe E. Ross plays Gunter Tootie, a policeman who patrols with his partner, Francis Muldoon, who you may recognize as Fred Gwynn. Now, Tootie is rather dim, while Muldoon is considered one of the sharper intellects in the department. In this episode, Tootie and Gunter are joined by a new recruit, Reginald Corrigan, who turns out to be quite the scholar. Naturally, Muldoon and Reginald hit it off. Their highbrow conversations make Tootie feel intellectually inferior. And if that doesn't make you think of Rashad, then nothing will. So what does Tootie do? He decides to learn something that they don't know so that he can impress them.
Please leave me alone. I gotta study.
And just what are you going to study?
Who knows? But tomorrow those two guys are going to know that they're riding with somebody who knows everything about something. I'm going to start with A. A-A-R-D-V-A-R-K.
Aardvark.
Aardvark. An African mammal of the anteater family. Okay, let those two wise guys spout off about music and architecture. The minute the subject of aardvark comes up, they're going to find out that they're riding around with someone who knows something.
So Tootie has to somehow get the subject of aardvarks to come up in the conversation. So watch how Tootie handles it.
Oh,
What is it?
that woman over there holding the leash.
You mean the one with the Pekingese dog?
Oh, is that a dog? I thought it was an aardvark.
Aardvark.
Yeah, that's an African mammal with a tubular
It
snout.
was in the Bartok piece that they showed their true genius.
And wasn't the Picasso exhibit the end?
So in the interview, Rashad badly wants others to think he knows more than they do. So he learns factoids about a topic. Not facts, but factoids. And since he desperately wants everyone to think he's a Renaissance man, he has latched onto the hardest subject he can think of, physics. He doesn't know anything about physics, but if he hears something in passing that he can recite to impress his friends and graduate advisor, he certainly won't pass up the opportunity. And somehow he managed to hear someone talking about plasmonics in dielectrics. So like Gunter Tootie learning something about aardvarks, Rashad has learned something about condensed matter physics. To be fair to Gunter Tootie, however, he at least understood what he was saying about aardvarks. You know, their length and how much they weigh and all that. Richey has no such luck because unlike aardvarks, physics is hard. But that's okay because nearly all of the numbnuts that hang around Richey don't know anything about physics either. The few that do are simply too polite to speak up. Also, Gunter Tootie in Car 54 didn't suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect. He never had any notions that he was a smart man and was never overconfident about his knowledge. Rashad Richey is the dictionary definition of Dunning-Kruger, even up to the point where he actually gave a physics talk to the National Society of Black Physicists. Remember, he doesn't know anything about physics. If he knew anything about physics, he wouldn't have had to spend most of his time talking about his childhood selling drugs and calling the cops on his mom's black boyfriend. I have a video where we watch his speech. You'll love it. So from now on, Rashad is Tootie. It even rolls off the tongue. Rashad Tootie Richey. And Tootie is just itching to talk about plasmonics. The trouble is that his conversation with Chike is not about physics at all. It's about ancient Egypt and the two men's devotion to black supremacy. Watch how Tootie shoehorns the topic into the conversation.
In addition to the fact that we got to sail the Nile and experience the culture of Egypt and learn the history and so forth, it was just phenomenal having you there, and we're looking forward to having you again this year.
Man, I'm at a loss for words. I talk for a living.
That's what these guys do, by the way. They compliment each other. We get to listen to it.
The sentiment is mutual, and thank you for saying that, Dr. Cole. It means the world coming from somebody like yourself who's authentic and at the top level of this industry. And I will say this just in a quick note. I've been studying the JED lately and trying to understand some of the power nuances connected to the JED. And I've come to a hypothesis, and I'm going to explain it quickly. For those who are engineers or physics students, you can go back and research this. When you have a metal, and you can have just a sheet of metal, it can be copper, it can be silver, it can be gold, it can be a sheet of...
Tootie doesn't even try to gently change lanes. He just yanks the wheel and does a 180.
Gold. And you put over that sheet of gold what's called a dielectric property. That dielectric property can be a crystal quartz, it could be glass, it could be a few things.
That tells us nothing about dielectrics. It can be a rock, it can be water, it can be fire, it can be air, it can be a few things. This is a perfect example of someone talking out of his ass. If he knew anything about the subject, he would have explained what a dielectric is, because it's not hard to understand. It's an insulator that if you immerse it into an electric field, you can induce one side of the insulator to become negatively charged and the other side to be positively charged. Now, ferroelectrics will do this as well, so it's not the only material that behaves this way, so it's not a perfect definition, but at least the listener will have learned something.
Anytime you do that, you create what's called a plasmon field. And that plasmonic field is this very, very small electromagnetic field that exists as a wave.
That tells us nothing about the plasmonic field. Another classic characteristic of a blowhard is that they explain concepts in terms that invoke just more jargon. The plasmon field is an electromagnetic field that behaves as a wave. By the way, physicists don't talk about small electromagnetic fields. That's just weird. They use weak and strong.
Okay? But it only exists in that hyperlocalized area. But here's what happens. If you shine the proper nanometer light scale to that plasmonic wave, that plasmon then expands beyond the localized region.
Richey is talking about the plasmon as if it's a gas. The plasmon is not actual matter. It's an effect that behaves collectively like a particle. It's like if you pluck a string and you watch the plucked part travel down the string as if it's a thing. No, it's an effect that travels down the string. Now that's an analogy. How does one shine a nanometer light scale? This is classic Tootie. He doesn't understand the difference between a physical property and physical behavior. In his book, he constantly refers to frequency as a behavior. It has a lot of frequency. No, frequency is just a property we use to describe how fast something oscillates. It's not a thing. And it's not behavior. And a nanometer light scale is not a thing either.
Which means you will have what's akin to AC power, alternating current, based on the wavelength. Now, the wavelength simply needs to be larger than the quantized scale of what we will call particles, just quantized energy, the quantized energy of the plasmon.
How does this expanding plasmon somehow just magically create alternating current? Yes, plasmonic fields will likely find applications in solar cells, and solar cells can store charge that can be transformed into alternating current. While the YouTube video he watched probably discussed this, he can't remember what was said. An expert would have had no problem staying on script, but he's not an expert. He's a tootie. So at this point, he's out of control. He's just blurting out scientific-y things that he heard, but doesn't understand well enough to make the connections between one factoid and another. Have you ever heard a sovereign citizen trying to argue with a cop? They have this script that they try to follow. It consists of a series of statements and questions, one after the other, designed to box the cop into a corner.
Hello, officer. Is there an emergency? I notice you have your emergency lights on. Do you suspect me of committing a crime? A speeding violation is not a crime.
Yada, yada, yada. Of course, it never works. And at some point, they run into a problem with their logic, so they go back to the top of the script.
Why do you have your emergency lights on?
It's like resetting your computer when it acts up. So, Rashad's out of control. He's just jabbering, he doesn't understand what he's talking about, and he knows it. So what does he do? He resets the script. Watch how he does it.
But the plasmon is automatically created when you put a dielectric property against metal.
See what he did? He went right back to the statement he used to open the conversation, because that part is what he remembers and thinks he understands. He felt smart when he was saying that part of the lecture, so he simply returns to it.
And all of a sudden, you have an energy field that only requires sunlight.
And of course, Tootie makes a huge revelation here. Do you not realize that he has found a way to create alternating current from sunlight? Man, I can't wait to tell Robert Fulton about this one. Tootie's work can inspire development on a huge scale. Before long, we'll see entire fields covered with these panels. Will they provide power to homes? Well, let's not get too carried away here. I mean, he's only a man.
And we've been able to prove this now in the laboratory. So that's something that I'm going to bring this year.
Hey, Tootie, I found a scientific equipment supplier for demonstrating your new sunlight to current generator. Here, and it's cheap. $16? Dude, that's only a fourth of the price for a new master's degree from Asia Pacific School of Business.
Once again, Doc, tell people how they can check out the information. Join us during this tour. And man, selling them now, man, my gosh, that's a power in itself. That was a beautiful thing.
Now, these two would resemble the pair of officers in Car 54 if Chike was more like Muldoon. But Chike is no Oppenheimer either. Stay tuned for my next video on this interview, where they discuss why they're taking a trip to the land of their ancestors. And no, I'm not talking about Ghana or Nigeria. No, Egypt. And those taking the trip get to hear Tootie talk physics all the way there and all the way back. His slave ancestors had a more pleasant voyage. Like my video and subscribe to my channel.